Yet, ironically, hundreds of Palestinians in the conflict zone of Gaza Strip are protesting against Hamas, the largest so far, and they are demanding that the group be thrown out. Gazans are demanding an end to the war, chanting Hamas out in a rare public show of opposition to the militant group that started the ongoing war on the 7th of October 2023. Several clips on social media have been circulating showing people at the Jabalia refugee camps burning tires and calling for an end to the war. Northern Gaza, where these protests are taking place, has been one of the most devastated areas of the region. Buildings reduced to rubble, much of the population migrating multiple times to escape death. The region relies only on humanitarian aid, but it has suffered a big setback when Israel halted all of that aid from entering Gaza at the start of March after the talks to extend the ceasefire failed. The United Nations Agency for Palestinian Refugees, UNRWA, said that no food, water, medicines or fuel has entered Gaza in the last 3 weeks, while warning of an acute hunger crisis soon. Before I introduce my guest on the show, take a look at this report.
The numbers are staggering. More than 50,000 people have been killed. Streets drenched in blood and debris as entire neighborhoods lie in ruins. Families weep over their lost loved ones, demanding justice. Yet, there is no sign of an end to the suffering in Gaza since the 2-month-long ceasefire ended. The ceasefire was meant to provide relief, but it ended with a new wave of destruction. Arab nations, led by Egypt, have been pressing for a reconstruction plan, one that so far has been ignored by both the United States and Israel. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has vowed that the military operation will continue until Hamas is dismantled entirely, calling any ceasefire proposals unacceptable unless they guarantee the destruction of the group. For those who have survived, life in Gaza has become unbearable. With homes destroyed, families are desperately seeking any form of shelter, whether in overcrowded tent camps or the remains of bombed-out buildings. But these shelters offer little safety. Hunger, thirst and trauma grip the population, while the fear of another strike never fades. Amid this, a rare protest against Hamas in northern Gaza has been gaining momentum, with people chanting Hamas out, a sign of growing frustration within the besieged territory. In a war that has already displaced so many, hundreds of thousands who fled south at the start of the conflict had begun returning north during the ceasefire, hoping to rebuild with what little is left. But with the bombings renewed, those hopes are once again shattered. During the brief truce, Hamas released more hostages from the 250 taken in its October 2023 attack. But now, with talks failing and violence escalating, the future looks increasingly bleak. For now, the bloodshed continues and Gaza remains a war zone with no clear end in sight. Bureau Report, Mirror Now.
I'm joined by Mr. Qamar Agha, foreign affairs expert. He's a senior journalist and somebody who has deep insights and knowledge into the dynamics that play out in West Asia. Mr. Qamar Agha, good evening and namaskar. My first question to you, what do you think about these protests? Are they organic or are they politically motivated? Because this clearly is a very rare precedent that we are seeing, that Gazans themselves are protesting against Hamas.
I think it is spontaneous. Because the people are sick and tired of war. They want, they want peace, they want stability, they want to go back their homes. They think, if Gaza surrenders arms, peace may return. So there are different conflicting views are coming, according to some reports, these protests have not taken place in Gaza. Instead, they are saying it has took place in West Bank. Nobody knows; it's not yet confirmed. But one thing I'm not surprised, because the way people are suffering, uh, Israel has cut down electricity, water supply. Desalination plant was destroyed earlier. Then food and other humanitarian assistance are not coming. So one should not surprise, they thought, it's in the best interest, if Hamas surrenders or Hamas ceasefire, and some peaceful solution might emerge out of these protests. Let's wait and see how it progresses, in the next couple of days.
Mr. Agha, it has been, of course, Israel's strategy as far as the aid cut is concerned. It has, understandably led to a lot of frustration among the local people there in Gaza, and therefore the desperation for basic survival. Do you think that has led to these protests, the aid halt?
There are multiple things. It's not only the aid. They want peace. They want, these are the people, most of the Gazans are educated and they're not poor like others, in many countries. There are a lot of people from Gaza, they're working in Europe, America, Arab countries. They're a highly educated community among the Arab world. Besides this, Hamas has never been a very popular organization. They won only one election. After that, they never contested election. But what was happened? Hamas would have been overthrown by the people. Because of the war, they fought and died. So people didn't protest, didn't say anything. So if there would have been a free and fair election, Hamas would have been defeated. That's a fact. But things have changed. From October 7 till now. Now first time. These sort of reports are coming up protesting against Hamas. But on the other hand, Israelis have also said that large number of youth have joined the Hamas also during this period. And this is one of the reasons they are resuming war also. One of the factors they said, one they have mentioned also. And the other problem is we don't get very much news from this region, because that is blockade. And some journalists are there who are reporting from the scene, and mostly this social media also. According to Reuters said that they have seen some images which they compare it with the Hamas, some buildings, satellite images, they said, and they said that it looks, it is Gaza. And this is an hour back, I've seen this report. So we'll have to wait and see, some more time. And if there will be, I tell you one thing, if there will be free and fair election, the Gazans and the Palestinians wanted a democratic state in Palestine. They don't want this religious extremist organizations, operating in their country. Their ultimate goal is this. But at the moment, they were calm, quiet, and now, they're coming out openly, it looks.
Let's talk about this one by one, Mr. Agha. There is, of course, free and fair elections. You also mentioned a lot of youngsters who are joining Hamas, even as these protests take place. So we can't be, completely certain that everybody is involved and everybody is revolting against Hamas. But do you think that these protests will sustain for a longer period? For the next few days, will we see these protests happening and at least reach to a point where these protesters can pressurize Hamas to, if not completely end the war, at least ease out the tensions a bit?
If continues for a longer period of time, there'll be tremendous pressure on Hamas, one thing. And second thing, this will lead to this will lead to internal conflict within Hamas, I believe, within Gaza. And but it is still early to say. We'll have to wait for some more time and see if it is organic, and it is being repeated again and again. Next few days, and number are swelling. Then there'll be big problem, and there'll be fight within the among the Gazans.
Mr. Agha, this battle is not completely and entirely only that of Hamas or Gaza or Israel. There are several countries from across the world that are involved in it. With these protests that are taking place, do you think, as they gain momentum, there will be other countries, outside of Palestine and Israel who will be extending their support to these protesters to fight against Hamas? Those, of course, who, stand against the group.
Quite possible, I don't think the Arab countries will extend any support to these protests because they don't have much leverage. Their neighbor is Syrian, and one side is basically the Egyptian government. And the Egyptian government, is basically opposed to Hamas. And that was one of the reasons Egypt has never supported Hamas, never extended support initially, and quite possible Egypt may extend support to these protesters. But so far, no evidence of that is seen.
Mr. Agha, then help me understand, can these protests also pressurize Hamas in a way that they sort of double down on what they're already doing, the kind of violence and bloodshed and, their actions as far as, this entire war is concerned? Do you think to portray a stronger image, to portray that, these protests are not going to be impacting us and we will be still fighting for what they say is the fight for the rights of the Palestinians, do you think this will encourage them in that direction of portraying a rather stronger image from what they currently have in that particular region?
Hamas has a very big network within the Gazan community. Social network is very strong. Plus, they have, it's a religious group. They have their presence in the mosque and other institutions because democratic institutions are no longer working. So they have in the police force, their people are in the school, colleges, universities. So they have very big network also. And I think they will use first this social pressure to put on these people not to protest. Later, what will happen, we'll have to wait and see. It looks, if the protests are organic, it means the Hamas is losing ground and people are losing trust. They believe, I think people have come, a good section of people have come to realize that Hamas cannot deliver peace. So therefore they are they're calling Hamas to quit. They're calling Hamas to go out of Gaza. That sort of voices are being coming up.
It's interesting, Mr. Agha, that you mentioned that Hamas is losing ground because as we play those visuals for our viewers to see of what's really happening there, and these are all several social media videos that have been circulated across platforms to show what exactly is happening. And like you mentioned, there's not much information, reliable, valid information, genuine information that's coming out because a lot of media is controlled by Hamas in that particular region. But several people say that these protests also resemble those that happened back in 2019. They were smaller protests, but they did have an impact. And those protests against Hamas were also used and benefited by Hamas's opposition group of Fatah. And this is something that people are talking about right now also, that perhaps these protests will lead other opposition groups, or like you mentioned, that within Hamas it might create a problem. that sort of situation could only worsen the sufferings of Gazans, because that clearly will not end the war, and that will lead to more and more violence in the region. Israel, not backing down, and of course now with Donald Trump coming in, that support base only getting stronger. But you mentioned free and fair elections, Mr. Agha, and that is something that obviously is not going to happen currently amid the war. But do you see that happening in the near future? Do you see that some sort of external support might, move towards or push them towards having an election when probably, the situation, the atmosphere is a little more peaceful?
It was promised, but for that, Israel has to withdraw first. Will that happen? It depends on Israel also. They have to withdraw. Then, some international agencies will fill the gap, conduct the election. This is what mentioned in the Egyptian peace plan. So it's a long process. They said that it will take 3 to 6 months. Provided Israel withdraw. Israel has a different plan. Israel plan is to. Israel is going ahead with the greater annexion of Gaza, at least half of it. Initially they planned. But then Trump is saying, these people should be expelled, should be thrown out, or should be sent to other countries. Basically, Egypt, is still adamant. His plan is to make Riviera over there, a beautiful financial hub of the Middle East in Gaza, because it is on the shores of Mediterranean Sea. It's a very beautiful area. This is strip, is very beautiful. Half of it northern Gaza. So all sorts of plan. Egypt is talking about, have come up with its own plan, to rebuild Gaza. And some of the far right Israelis are talking, that we should start building settlements over there. So many things are there. I don't think Israelis are going to withdraw anytime soon. They have made it absolutely clear. They have indicated, they have said it clearly that Gaza is part of the biblical land. And it is their land. It's not an occupied territory. Neither Gaza nor West Bank or East Jerusalem. So they said this is all part of historical biblical land. And they're also saying now that Sinai Peninsula is also part of the biblical land. So they're saying Israel should Egypt should return Sinai Peninsula back to Israel, which is occupied in 1967 Arab-Israeli war. So all sorts of plans are there. It's very difficult to say what would happen in future. But one thing is certain: Israelis are not going to go anywhere. They have the full support and backing of the United States of America, particularly the Trump administration.
Right, of course, we'll have to wait and watch how that really moves forward. But Mr. Qamar Agha, thanks very much for joining us tonight and getting us an understanding of what exactly has been happening. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll really have to wait and watch how this situation moves forward and whether the protests in Gaza do sustain their momentum, because remember, it's only been 2 days since these protests have been happening, and we'll have to wait and watch whether, more and more people join in, or Hamas is successful in dispersing them as they were today. So this still hasn't ended, but of course, it's a wait and watch game whether or not people in northern Gaza are able to sustain this. Because remember, northern Gaza is a region in the Gaza Strip which has faced the most suffering since this war started and Israel started those strikes against Hamas after the 7th October attacks back in 2023. And since then, there has been massive suffering. There have been killings, bloodshed, but there's also been the aid halt, which Mr. Qamar Agha and I were talking about, and how the United Nations has now said that a day without no fuel, no food, no medicine, no water in that particular region will result in an acute hunger crisis, along with, of course, the other suffering of not having having a home, not having a land to call your own, and your family and loved ones getting killed every day. So we'll have to wait and watch how this really pans forward. But this is, of course, an extremely unprecedented situation that Gaza is witnessing, Gazans themselves wanting Hamas out of the Gaza Strip. With that, it's time to wrap Global Mirror up, but news and updates will continue on the other side. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. Up next is Shreya Upadhyaya with Beyond the Headline.